Thank you. Councillor Brewer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support what Councillor Cashmore is saying. I see the submission that I actually think it's kind of cherry-picking some of the stats there, and I accept that the staff numbers may be static. I accept that per capita investment for Auckland may be behind nationwide, and I accept that the resolution rates in Auckland may be behind per capita. But when you look on the police website, and again it's the police website, not the National Party website, and you look at the Auckland district areas, Auckland Central, Eastern and Western, and talking as Councillor Cashmore was about the proactive role, one could easily write a submission that argued that compared to May 16, compared to May 15, the preventative activities on the street at reducing crime and victimisation, the number of activities that the police have proactively done successfully has increased when you look at pre-warning charges, road checkpoints, vehicle stop, foot patrols, drunks taken home, detox. And then when you look at offences that police have proactively discovered or detected, drug supply, drug use, disorder, assaults, they too, those proactive numbers have also increased. So I think it's actually quite a balanced call, and we're looking at some stats, but we also need to go there with some positive statistics in mind as well. But in saying that, I support this, because when you do look at the offences being reported May 16 to May 15, overall they are up. When you look at serious assaults, public place assaults in the wider Auckland district, dwelling assaults, robbery, burglary, vehicles stolen is reported is down somewhat from May 16 to May 15. So overall, the reported crime is up on the last 12 months from May 16 to May 15. But may I just put on the record, Mr. Chair, that some of the preventative activities and proactive work that the police have been doing is equally up and showing some good positive results as far as nipping some of the crime activity in the bud before it even occurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, the last thing we need, I think, at the local government conference is some sort of proxy party political argument with some people piling on to attack the government, and then people who support the government reacting in defence, and then that would actually not be helpful at all. What I think we need to be a little bit more specific, first of all, in emphasising the great confidence that the public has in seeing the police about, with police presence, physical presence, and that the funding that we are asking for is not having a go at Mr. English or anyone, and it's not a funding for the police administration or bureaucracy. It's for, and I'd like to add, including increased foot patrols in our cities and towns by sworn police officers, because when you say community policing, that means could be police patrols stopping people on Waiheke Island and breath testing them, which they do apparently very heavily, but that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for boots on the ground. We're looking for people on the beat, and talking about people on the beat is probably a cliche, so foot patrols in our cities and towns is something we need to be specific about. Otherwise, A, we could end up with a great big political argument, and B, achieve increased money for the police, and it all ends up going into computers or whatever.
Thank you. And Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, just quickly, just to run up, there's some good comments been made here this morning, Mr. Chair, and this is I don't see this by any means attacking police and attacking the government. No. I see this as actually working together. And as we well know, there's some good stats being registered here this morning. But one of the biggest concerns we have across New Zealand is domestic violence. And domestic violence is hugely on the increase, which takes our cars off the road for an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours maximum. And then, of course, that strains our policing. The police do a fantastic job. We just need to get them behind them and support them.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Well, Mr Chairman, I support this, but like Councillor Cashmore, these are complex issues, and I wouldn't want to see the advocacy being put forward solely on numbers. I think the government have to understand that they do carry responsibility for passing legislation that is going to enable us. I mean, I pick up the vexed issue of fare evasion. You know, the inability to be able to have the appropriate enforcements means that if you take the current situation, which has had publicity at the moment at Green Lane, where kids are jumping on the train, they're getting off the train, they're becoming window washers. So I don't want to spend time on this, but just to encourage those who are putting this work together and the advocacy for it, that there can be a comprehensive approach to the needs that Auckland requires, because often those police that we do have can be greatly assisted by making sure that they've got the necessary legislative enforcement tools, which has, I think, been a bit of a gap for us.
Thank you. And Councillor Crum?
Yes, Mr Chair, can I just get clarification, please? Is there someone in the room that could answer my previous question in regards to our normal course, our normal process for how we handle Local Government New Zealand remits at the conference?
Well, we usually discuss it with councillors once the papers come out
Exactly.
and decide what we're going to do.
So we get all the remits through committee.
We don't
And
do it through, we've never done it through a committee. We just get together and talk about the remits that are coming up at conference.
In an informal capacity.
Yeah.
So this is unusual.
Yeah.
Thank you. No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. We now move to
11.
Regional Environmental Natural Heritage Grant Program Review. Fran and Quinton, thank you, and Dot, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm Quentin Espy, this is Dot Dalziel and Fran Hayson on my right. This report, which is to request approval to adopt the 2016-2017 Regional Environmental and Natural Heritage Grant Program Framework, including some changes from last year, is being presented to your committee because you have the necessary decision-making powers and there's no timely Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee meeting beforehand. The grant program focuses on 4 issues. Firstly, sustainable living with respect to, for example, energy and water, and with an emphasis on best practice, behavioural change and reach. Secondly, biodiversity with an emphasis on land ecosystem enhancement against trend through conservation and biosecurity initiatives. The details are in the report. Thirdly, healthy water with an emphasis on aquatic ecosystem enhancement against trend and human health protection. And fourthly, on kaitiakitanga, such that the projects empower mana whenua in their role as kaitiaki for Auckland's natural environment. The requirement of Resolution N2015/33 from the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Commission has been implemented in this report. The resolution requested staff to put in place a process that identifies assessment and measurement of fund outcomes in general, and particularly for outcome 1, which is the Maori of the natural environment is in optimal health, and outcome 6, which is manu whenua are empowered, enabled, respected and recognised in their customary kaitiaki role and participate in the co-management of natural resources. This recommended process is shown in, if you'd like to look in your reports, Table 2 on page 21 and paragraph 23 on page 22. The details for assessment and measurement pertinent to outcomes 1 and 6 can be found in paragraphs 24 to 33 on pages 22 and 23. The recommended changes made as a result of the review, see paragraph 6, page 19 for a summary, are an update of the grant framework, including the grant assessment process and criteria. These changes are updating regional significant criteria, reframing assessment criteria, and creating a panel to assess applications, including a specialist in Maori outcomes. In summary, if the report is approved, the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee resolution will have been addressed, and the grant process improvements will be put into place to assess and measure fund outcomes accordingly. This encompasses a change to assessment criteria, including specific assessment against Maori outcomes. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher, you have a question?
Mr Chairman, I want to address my questions. If I can refer members to page 21 and the table that we have on the changes to regionally significant criteria. My question to you comes from the basis that I think we have too little allocated in terms of addressing Kari dieback, and another, I could list a whole range of outcomes that I would like to see Auckland Council be more proactive about. And my fear is, with what you're proposing, that the direction in terms of empowerment of mana whenua is laudable, but is that going to be further at the expense of some of the specific environmental outcomes that we're looking for? There has been too little money in this area, in my opinion, for the outcomes that we seek, and I would like you to answer it as honestly as you can as to whether this is going to further diminish what are meagre resources for monumentally challenging issues.
I'd love to answer that through the chair. I think that's, there are very serious, important questions that you're asking behind this that probably the RENH, Regional Environment and Natural Heritage grant funding by itself can't address. Nevertheless, within the constraints of that budget, what we have seen is a significant overlap between the regionally significant environmental issues that Council as a whole is trying to address and the exercise of kaitiakitanga. So we're in a blessed situation where there is very strong overlap. For example, particularly in the water quality space, there's very clear indications from mana whenua that that's a strong area of interest regionally and locally and by rohi. And we also have quite significant mana whenua engagement in Kari dieback at the regional tranche of the national response. So mana whenua engagement, not through Regional Environment and Natural Heritage grant funding, but through engagement on that process. So my assessment, our assessment would be at this point in time that there's very strong overlap.
I guess that it is important that we are motivating as many groups as we possibly can to leverage the funds that we have to get wider support and outcomes here. So I take some comfort from your response, but I just want to be assured that we can work with volunteers and groups right across the whole spectrum who may also be able to leverage other funds from other philanthropic organisations. So, it's that seed, isn't it, that you can plant that might grow. Just wanting to make sure it's being well used.
Thank you for that. Through the chair, thank you. We've recorded that concern and that interest. And I think that we need to come back with some assessment after this funding round that shows that helps to answer that question.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Webster?
Oh, yes, very quickly. Seeing Councillor Fletcher mentioned it, are we working with MPI and DOC on the Kari dieback issue? I mean, Auckland Council is doing a lot, but are they reporting back to us on that, what they're doing?
Oh, through the chair, that's beyond my particular
I just
purview,
want, okay, maybe
but we can bring back an answer.